Next up is Deborah Arndell, the president and founder of Armor Advisory Services. She has made her mark on the financial services industry with over a decade, since 1998, but over a decade of that was spent inside various organizations in compliance, risk, and operations roles. She later transitioned into consulting and policy oversight, serving as a senior examiner and officer at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, before launching Armor in 2016. Deborah brings a rare blend of firsthand banking experience, regulatory insight, and strategic consulting. Whether she's rebuilding compliance frameworks, guiding banks through mergers, or refining their BSA AML programs, her approach is rooted in fairness, clarity, and high-impact solutions. In her session, Deborah will share a counterintuitive, cyclical approach to action that helps you do more with less, boosting revenue, efficiency, and outcome quality, while lowering stress and waste. So with that, please help me welcome Deborah.
Good afternoon. How is everyone? Well, thank you. I appreciate it. All right, so I appreciate you guys coming to the session today. I have admittedly, back in the corner here, felt a little bit like an interloper because I'm not an HR person, but I assure you I'm on your side. And this entire conversation is actually about you, even though it may not seem like that for the first 10 or 15 minutes, all right? So the hidden cost of inaction, stop leaving money and talent on the table. I'm gonna give you a little bit of additional background. So I have been in financial services for 25 years, and I originally, when I went to undergrad, I was getting my degrees in biology and chemistry. And I thought, I'm gonna go out to the University of Minnesota, and I'm gonna get my master's in wildlife conservation and zoology, and I'm going to help with wolf reintroduction at Yellowstone. That was the dream, right? And then, like many of you, I started working at a financial institution and I got sucked into the vortex and I never left, right? So I don't know what's going on with the wolves in Yellowstone, but I do know what's going on in the banking industry, so I do want to talk about that. So I have been in the industry for 25 years. I did start in the industry itself and eventually made my way to the auditing space, eventually to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And that's probably where the concept of branching out on my own originated. One of the things I realized as a regulator is my job is to tell you all the things you do wrong, but I'm also the person in the best position to show you how to do them correctly, right? But as a regulator, I can't do that. We're not authorized to do that. We have to let you try, fail, try, succeed, whatever the case may be. And I realize I am a solutions person. I like to fix things. I like to build things and create things. It's why I have my own production company and have a movie with Netflix. I mean, I love creativity. And what I always thought is that, man, Deborah, why are you in the legal field and the risk space when you like to create things? And what I realized is the things I loved about my job was the creativity behind building my program, building my risk department, building out the Federal Reserve's compliance department. So while I was there, I did have responsibility for all of the institutions across compliance, from the smallest community bank all the way up to the largest systemically important financial institutions like Goldman, Citi, Chase, Deutsche. But it was time. It's like, I'm a firm believer that there's not a single reason ever for any of you to have violations, systemic violations in your exam reports. And you might be saying, what does this have to do with us? It's everything to do with you, right? So I left, I started Armor, and now I spend all of my time inside credit unions and banks helping them redesign. I build AML programs and risk assessments and fraud programs. I go in and do mergers and acquisitions, all sorts of things. But it's more than just about process. I deal with a lot of people, and one of my favorite partnerships is with human resources. So I do want to talk about this model that I use with all of my clients, because my goal when I come in is to make you a much better institution and to make sure that we are focusing not just on the process side, but the people side. Because at the Fed, like every aspect of your life, There's the process money side and the people side, right? And the people side matters to me. So when I was at the Federal Reserve, I did have an incident, and I share this because I want you to know that I'm on your side. I'm not just the person coming in and rebuilding your programs, but I had an incident with a large bank, and they were about to acquire another institution, and they were rated a 2. I'm not gonna go into the Camels ratings and all of that, but if you know anything about Camels, the people part of your overall rating for an examination is about this big. It sits in that M of management, right? Everything else about money and process. The Federal Reserve is no different. We have all of the safety and soundness folks running around making sure that capital and asset quality and earnings, liquidity, everything looks great. But that little bit of M sometimes pushes back. And this was an incident where that M pushed back. We had, because I had compliance, I also had consumer protection, we had a people problem at this institution. And so I took their component, I dropped them down, and their composite fell to a 3. The problem was they were in the middle of that acquisition. And when you're a 3 or less, you can't acquire and you can't merge. If you can't do it right at this size, you're not going to do it right at this size. So it was placed on hold. The Federal Reserve was very angry. The safety and soundness folks were like, Deborah, how dare you? Board of Governors, here we come. We got to go there and sort this thing out. So I found myself in the galley at this meeting watching the safety and soundness side and the compliance side of the Board of Governors arguing back and forth about whether or not there should be a 2 or a 3. And I'm in the galley. I'm not all that significant at this point, but Janet Yellen is sitting at the table. The entire Board of Governors is there. And suddenly somebody says, because I'm assuming they thought I wasn't in the room, Deborah said that when she goes back, they're going to be upgraded to a 2. I never said that. So Janet Yellen says, Ms. Arndell here. So I stood up, and I'm talking to Janet Yellen, totally, obviously, not on my radar screen as something I was going to be doing that day. But she asked me, is it true they're going to be upgraded? And I said, Ms. Yellen, with all due respect, I don't predict the future. They may very well be upgraded to a 2. They may stay a 3. They may be downgraded to a 4. She made the decision, we're going to wait that 90 days until Deborah goes back in, and then we're going to make a decision. I was probably in that day the most hated person at the Federal Reserve. And so I went over to the Board of Governors building, and the head of the compliance area, he shouts at me down the hallway, and he's like, Arndell, that was courageous. And I said, well, I'm glad you think so, because when they fire me at the Fed, I'm going to need a job, so you're going to have to hire me here at the Board of Governors. But luckily, I worked for an institution with integrity, so that didn't happen. But I know how important people are. You guys have been fighting for them my entire career. Even though I'm in there fixing your process, it is not lost on me how critical the people side is. So I really do want to talk a lot about, again, this model that I go through with all of my clients. So what is the biggest challenge that you're going to face? All of my clients have one thing in common. Does anybody know what it is? They're all human beings. Most of them. I think there's probably some challenge to a few of them, right? But 95% of those human beings also have a secondary trait in common. Anybody guess what that might be? They act like human beings. And when I say they act like human beings, what I mean is, who thought human psychology would be part of this conversation? But it is critical. It affects everything we do. So human beings react to 2 things, and only 2 things. We either move towards pleasure or we move away from pain. Even when we speak, we only speak from a place of fear or a place of love. There is nothing else, no other place it comes from. It's one of those 2. Our actions come from moving away from pain or moving towards pleasure. And when you put those 2 stimuli together at the same time, which one do you think we do? Do we move towards pleasure or move away from pain? Anybody want to venture a guess? You got a 50-50 chance of getting it right. We move away from pain. So I go into my clients when there's a lot of pain. People call me when there's a lot of pain, right? So one of the things I try and do with my clients is I want to instill upon them to please stop really being 100% human all the time. I need you to stop being reactive. I need you to be proactive and preventative. And so I've built a model with my clients to help them get ahead of these problems, to create better institutions so that when you hear those dreaded words, we have an exam coming up, My response when I was in the industry was, that's great, fantastic, bring in a backhoe because there is nothing to see here, right? We had confidence. So my job, when people ask me, Deborah, what do you actually do? My job is to reduce your stress, it's to boost your confidence, it's to bring you a more joyful institution where you can focus a little bit more on the future and have those thoughtful, meaningful conversations around where are we going, what do we want to do. So the question is then, how do we get to that space instead of paying people like me to come in and correct things long after it was overdue? Well, do you play checkers or do you play chess? Right? Most of my clients play checkers. It's a pretty straightforward game. You don't really have to think about much, see what your opponent does, you respond to that accordingly. I want my clients playing chess. I want you 5 moves ahead. I want you using strategy. There are trillions and trillions, like 10 to the 120th power of the number of moves in a chess match. So I absolutely want to instill in my clients the importance of being strategic. So how do we do that? Well, in linear time, we have the past, the present, and the future. And I'm going to use the analogy of a car. How many of you, if you were in your vehicle right now, and all you had, forget your backup camera, all you have is that old school rear view mirror, and you had to drive forward at 50 miles an hour looking through that rear view mirror? How many of you would feel comfortable doing that? And yet, you do it every day. We spend so much time looking through that tiny little rearview mirror at the past and all the things going wrong back there. So the first thing I do is I come in and I clean up the past. Your backlogs, your lookbacks, your compliance findings, your audit findings, your examination findings, all the little skeletons in your closet, and all the stuff that hasn't been identified yet that you're so fearful someone might actually find. How many of us, when we have something in our hidden past, are constantly thinking about it? We worry about it nonstop. So I come in, the first thing I want to do is I want to clean up your past. And in the car, this is the moment where I'm driving your vehicle. You can be in the passenger seat navigating, but I'm driving your vehicle because we have to get this cleaned up quickly. In the present, your side view mirrors, it's very fleeting, right? You're seeing stuff fly past you, but most of us are spending a lot of time here. We're putting out fires all day long. We don't have time to clean up the past. Our present is already hectic enough. And so in this phase, when I'm actually going in and streamlining operations and risk and stuff for folks, and again, it does have an impact on human resources, is I'm usually in the passenger seat and I'm rotating back and forth with the institution, streamlining this present. We're going to talk about that. That's actually where we're going to spend a lot of our time today, is in the present. But then really where we want to be is looking out that giant windshield, right? We all want to be focused on the future. We have eyes in the front of our head for a reason. We were meant to be looking forward, right? Our joints and everything actually carry us forward. And yet, where are most of my clients? I went back and did an analysis. 40% of my clients, this is what they look like. They have a ton of past stuff they're trying to clean up. And the words, I asked them to provide some words about how they feel, right? Look at those words: powerless, desperate, angry, worried, agitated. 55% of my clients, this is what they look like. They at least have a little bit more future they can focus on, but their present is huge. Their past is still fairly significant, and these are the words that they use to describe how they feel in their current climate before we cleaned them up. Again, not very attractive words, right? That incredible sense of urgency, the uncertainty, the anxiety that comes with being there. And then 5% of my clients, at the time they actually brought me in proactively, this is where they were, and this is where I want them all to be. Look at the change in words, right? They get to move with clarity, anticipation, the confidence. This is the space I want every single institution to operate in, and that's what we're going to talk about today. How do you get there? Because most of us are operating in these vicious cycles, right? We do it in our personal lives. We do it in our professional lives. And we just continue to make the problem worse. But I want to replace the vicious cycle with the victory loop. And that's what the streamlining in the present is about. Let's create the victory loop. And again, that's going to be our focus today. But this is where we actually get to build something that continues to snowball and domino on itself. So when we make a change here, it improves this, which continues to improve this, and it circles back and it just continues to get better. And so, again, it's just a domino effect. So I want to go through some examples with you guys and talk about how this actually affects you, because it does. We talk a lot in these sessions about performance and employee relations, and we talk about acquisition. So we're talking a lot about what you guys have already inherited, the people you already have there, right? You have to deal with them. And then the acquisition is the new people or the new roles that are being brought on. But there's a whole world that exists before we even get to that place. And that is, does any of that even make sense? The way that you're structured today doesn't even make sense. And so one of the first questions or one of my mantras is, if you want a better answer, ask a better question. So my question isn't, okay, how do I come in and correct you and help you fix things? It's, how would I build you today from scratch if I was building you today, right? So I want to show you some examples of some of the results that I've been able to achieve with clients, because I want you to see the impact of what actually are, they're time-consuming changes, but they're not these heavy lifts. They just take an investment of time. So here's an example of vendor management. This institution had 337 vendors, including 12 critical. They had decentralized a lot of stuff. So legal was managing contracts, chief risk officer had the assessments, the BSA officer had OFAC. The vendor manager didn't manage anything. I'm guessing at most of your institutions, the vendor manager is the person who, they're the repository for your contracts. They're doing the quick risk assessment. But they're not making decisions around whether or not you should bring a vendor on, or whether you already have a vendor who should be doing that work, or you've got someone that it's a vendor that you're currently using for something else, but they also offer that service. So what happens is we end up just adding, business lines are just adding and adding and adding vendors, but there's nobody actually in control of that centralized process of saying, does that even make sense? Let's talk about what that should look like. So this person wasn't managing anything, and it was costing them about $148 million a year in contracts alone. So I said, hey, why don't we go in, we're gonna centralize this process, we're gonna give the vendor manager absolute authority. Now this is where I get to go off on my little tangent about accountability versus ownership. When I go into a client, there's one thing I always tell them, you can give me both accountability and ownership. You could give me neither, but you will not give me one or the other. Most of us have accountability, but we don't have ownership. And I've heard that a lot in this room, that we're accountable for human resources, but we don't have the ownership to make the policies, to make the decisions around how it's gonna operate. That's a position I don't find myself in, but I know a lot of you do. And so what I try to do with a lot of my clients is empower those staff to actually have a full-blown role. I want them to have both, because when we have ownership, our performance goes up, right? We feel like we own it. We have control. How many of you have been in a rental car and seen the quality of like the way the person before you left it? Because it's not theirs, right? I treat even rental cars like they're mine. So I like to have accountability and ownership. So I gave this person ownership of vendor management, and we built it out and made a ton of changes. But look what happened after. Reduced the number of vendors and critical vendors. And ultimately where we ended up is a significant reduction in the overall number of both the vendors and the critical. This actually, we reduced the number of contracts, so we had less legal time, fewer resources necessary, fewer delays. We reduced the number of risk assessments and risk ratings that had to be done. We reduced the accounting vendor payments, freeing up time to do other things. We reduced our IT and IS risks. We improved our relationships with our existing vendors. We improved the functionality across the organization. We empowered that vendor manager to actually be proactive, to be engaged, to execute, and to enter into better contracts, and gave them the authority. The business lines can decide what they might want, but you get to help us decide what we need, right? And so essentially what happened is they used the savings, and it was millions of dollars, to actually purchase a better vendor management software program. And so again, this is a very minor change, but how this affects you, particularly at a larger institution, is that vendor management, there are institutions, clients I've had, where they could actually reallocate some of their vendor management resources to another area because they had better accountability and ownership. So not only are they saving money and time and effort, And they were actually also able to reduce their need for legal counsel because they were spending a lot of time doing contract review. This is a small change, and it had massive impact, right? One that you might find a little bit more interesting is this one. This is a client that had 404 people across the organization, 378 full-time individuals. 5 IT contractors, 2 accounting contractors. Again, they had just a ton of consultants running around, partial hiring freeze. The revenue was falling rapidly. And what I did is I went in and I worked with them to evaluate and streamline some of their areas to really look at what they were doing, what staffing was necessary, what they needed, and also what was causing the vacancies, because they had a lot of key roles that just couldn't be filled. And they were not in a geographic location where that should have been a challenge for them. So the question then is, when you get into this, what happens then when you go and you start to evaluate all of these areas and find out what's going on, who are you actually, what work is being done, who do we need to actually have to do the work, instead of just assuming that it's a vacancy, we need to fill it. It's a new role, we need to add it. Not an assumption I make. So I want to go through and figure out how do we streamline what you're doing, make sure it's what you need to be doing, and then let's figure out the staffing and see what we actually need and go from there. So the results, we went from 404 people to 305, all full-time, no longer had any part-time. And we reallocated some of those positions. So this isn't always about getting rid of folks. It's also about reallocating. And sometimes it's about giving them a better title, right? Improving their pay. And I do want to talk about that, because what happens when you go from 404 people to 305, another one of my mantras, I would rather have 6 exceptional people than 12 mediocre ones. And I can pay those 6 people more money. And then when I pay them more money, I can keep them longer term, right? Fewer people for you all in HR to deal with, right? Because you guys don't want the performance issues, right? You guys have better things to do. You'd rather be focused, I'm guessing, on compensation and benefits rather than employee relations and dealing with the business lines when they're calling about the person who decided that attendance is going to be their next new issue. So all of these reductions are massive for everybody in the organization because you have less of an administrative concern. And I've got a client currently, they had a staff of 7 in their fraud department, and they were doing A, B, C, and D, getting all that done with 7 people. I went in, found out they had performance and attendance issues. We got rid of 4 of those folks because they weren't adding any value. What do you think happened in the department as far as getting A, B, C, and D done with only 3 people instead of 7? They got it all done. And they're also doing E and F. Because morale went up, the amount of time they were spending on writing people up and coaching people, and the amount of foot traffic that was coming through there, the amount of conversations that were going on that weren't necessary, all of this, we went from 7 people to 3, getting more work done, gave those people pay bumps, gave 2 of them better titles, and they are outperforming a staff twice their size, right? So in this case, again, you can see that we essentially dropped the number of people. And once you make changes to, obviously, the positions, job descriptions matter, titles matter, pay matters, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how you deal with that. It's the next layer. But we've cleaned up the past. We're now in this present, trying to clean this up. And again, I can go through area after area after area, you guys. These are all examples. This is just a simple compliance risk assessment. A lot of my clients have terrible risk assessments. They just throw everything in there and they look at everything every year. So I went into this particular client and said, okay, right now you guys are spending 43 to 52 weeks doing compliance reviews. There's one of you. They didn't do any of the Community Reinvestment Act for credit unions. That's not applicable to you. But they weren't doing any of the fair lending annual reviews, comparative file reviews. They weren't doing, the compliance risk assessment was found acceptable by the regulators. Acceptable, absolutely acceptable. You want to look at everything every year? Go have at it, right? Regulators' concern isn't how much time and money you're wasting. It's as long as your capital's good, they're not going to be focused on what you're doing in that management component of the CAMELS rating. The bank had 1 compliance officer and 2 analysts. So what we did is I went through their compliance risk assessment. This literally took me 4 weeks to redo the entire thing. Redid it in the middle of the year. They went from 43 weeks of annual reviews to around 30. That was just the first 6 months. The second year, after now we had compliance findings and audit findings, exam findings, we have to go in and revise that risk assessment, we got it down to 23 weeks. And then the third year, finally, we ended up down to about, I think we were about 18, 19 weeks of total. So they went from 43 weeks a year to about 18. So what do you do when you save all that time? Well, the first question people ask is, like, well, do we get rid of someone? No, let's take that and build on that success. So what we ended up doing is taking the revenue that they saved from all that time, and they reinvested that into some software to help them do a better job. They brought CRA and fair lending in-house, stopped paying those vendors to do it. They got better reporting data out of those systems. That allowed the board to get better metrics and stuff. They were able to go out and do better marketing. They had a better understanding of their marketing. They were able to go out and produce, get more applications, which converted into more loans, which converted into more money, which they then were able to convert back into additional marketing. So again, what you do is you start to reduce workload, sometimes reduce staff, but you build out revenue and you build out these opportunities by stacking these wins, and they just keep feeding into each other, right? And again, these are just a few examples. Do this across all of operations and retail and risk, and you start to see that over time, you can build up substantial savings. You're saving a ton of time and energy and resources when you guys have limited access to some of those, right? Some of you are fairly small institutions. So I understand that, look, I'll be honest, this presentation, this is what I talk to CEOs about, and CFOs, and chief risk officers and chief compliance officers. But the reason I wanted to present the same thing to you is I wanted you to A, know what I share with them, because this is how you change your institution, but B, because in the next step, I think you guys have to have a better seat at the table. And I tell all my clients that, and some of you may have the power to kind of push this model in your own institutions. But again, it's just going through. AML program, same thing. We're spending a lot of time doing stuff that doesn't make any sense. And I want clients operating in very efficient, effective environments. That's not about doing the bare minimum, that's doing the things that make sense, right? So went in 700 alerts per week with its automated AML tool. Backlog was coming because they didn't have enough staff to manage 700 alerts. So over time, they were going to find these were going to continue. It's like a sink that's running. It's going to keep running until you turn it off, right? And so what they end up doing is most people will drop towels down on the floor, start trying to clean up the water, but the sink is still running. So the two things we need to do is we need to clean up your backlog, that's your past. We need to turn off that faucet, which is optimizing your actual solution, your system, to make sure that you don't have 700 alerts coming out. So we started just going through and making all these changes. The bank had, I think at the time, they had 11 people, 11 contractors, BSA officer, and assistant BSA officer, and their salaries paid per month were $100,000. They were under a formal enforcement action as well. So what's the first thing you do if you're me and you come into an organization with 11 BSA staff, you're under an enforcement action, what's the first thing a regulator would want you to do? Cut staff? No, of course not. But that's the first thing we did. Looked at performance. We had 5 people who were not performing. These were people who were part of a very toxic environment. We got rid of them. Had a conversation with the regulators. Deborah, what the hell are you thinking? We need bodies. I said, we don't need bodies, we need minds, we need capable people. Again, I'd rather have a lower quantity of higher quality people than a high quantity of lower quality people. So we cut them, and what happened? suddenly performance went up. Because we all know that that toxic person is bringing down your good performers, right? So cut the staff in half, started to improve, and ended up, again, we built some other parts of this program to build it out, to make it better, improved it. But ultimately, this is an institution that was looking at about 37 million in penalties from FinCEN. But I did their look back, I did their backlog. We got them out of that 37 million in penalties, walked them through what we were doing, ended up saving this institution about 45 million when all was said and done by making some simple changes and doing things the right way. And now even today, they have grown. Their asset size has increased by 25%. Their BSA staff has increased by 10. They continue to find efficiency. So I will say to all of you, if you have a consultant who comes in and they just want to pitch a tent and hang around, get rid of them. My job is not to come in and be your crutch forever. It's to come in and fix things and transfer the knowledge to you on how to continue to build out that long-term sustainable solution, right? So just be mindful of that, because what I find is I always do flat rate contracts because I don't believe that contracts, if you let them, will grow legs and start walking around. I like flat rate, right? Here's what you're gonna pay. That includes everything. But be mindful of that with consultants. I think some, just like lawyers, like not all lawyers are bad. A lot of them are, but not all are. Not all consultants are bad, but there are a lot of them out there. And just like with vendor management, you can bring in 7 people to do 7 different jobs, or you can find people. There are some people like me out there that do multiple things, so you don't have to hire multiple people. But the point is simply that you come in, you fix it, you help the institution, you transfer the knowledge, and you help them be able to recreate, right? And you can see the changes. This one was significant because this one was a really toxic environment. This is one where a CEO had embezzled and the entire institution was toxic. There was nepotism. There were people in actual employees committing fraud because they figured if the CEO is doing it, I can do it. So we went in and cleaned house, right? But now they have a great program, and I'm very proud of it, and I'm proud of the people that have continued to move it forward. But the point is simply that when we come in and we make these changes, and we can really clean up and give people a place where they actually come in and find joy in what they do, and they feel like they're adding value, that they are appreciated by the people that they work for, it makes a significant change. And again, it's just this domino effect. And when people, one of the things, the Federal Reserve taught me a lot. I shared some of this with Amy Downs this morning after reading her book. One of the things that the Fed taught me is that conversation really is the currency of a relationship, and most of us are making withdrawals all the time, right? We should be making deposits. The other thing they taught me is that I always thought that to get ahead in this world, that you worked really, really hard, you get promoted, you work hard, you get promoted, and that's how I've operated my entire career. But there are also people out there that make other people look bad so they can look better, even though they've done nothing to achieve. But the Fed taught me that there's a third way, and that's when we lift other people up, we raise ourselves higher. And so my job ultimately is to lift people up. It's what I do. I fix process to lift people up and to make the jobs of people like human resources a little bit easier, to bring people to the table that need to be there, like human resources and marketing, people that get left off to the side. Because again, I've been in that space where people mattered less than process. And rightfully so, again, but both of them drive revenue at institutions, but we do have a tendency to focus a lot on money and process. So again, very proud of these changes, but I found my joy in lifting these folks up and having people come back and say, you know what, I never felt valued. And now I can't imagine being anywhere else. I want to help them build out this program and grow this department. Electronic Funds Transfer Act. Again, this is one of the easiest changes. You guys, most institutions can save, 95% of whatever they're paying somebody to handle Regulation E in about an hour. It's one of the most ridiculous consumer protection laws. And look, I like consumer protection laws, but this one's a little bit crazy. I don't want to go into the details. The point is simply that in most cases, if you are not outsourcing your Regulation E stuff to your core or to a third party, and even if you're doing it to a third party, you're probably wasting a lot of money. What happens with Reg E, and I'll just do a quick explanation because this is a quick save for anybody at your institution. Most institutions are paying someone like $40,000 or $50,000 a year. I've got clients paying up to $200,000 a year that are big banks that are just managing all of the POS and the ATM and the ACH claims that come from debit cards and transactions on accounts that are either disputed or fraudulent. You're paying a lot of money to what end? To jump through about 18 hoops to investigate something that 99% of the time you're paying anyway? Why are we doing that, right? Let's just figure out the 99% we normally pay and figure out that 1% we don't, and let's investigate that 1% and reallocate that staff somewhere else and save ourselves hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is a client that saved half $500 million over the course of 5 years by making this one change. So again, this is the stuff that I talk to compliance officers all the time. I mentor them. How many of you think of your compliance officer as the no department? They know no in about 100 different languages, right? We are not no people. What we are no people with a K-N-O-W. And what we should be doing with that information is helping you all understand, here are your guardrails. If you want to do X, my job is to help you figure out how to do it without violating one of the guardrails. And if you choose to violate the guardrail anyway, here are the consequences. And are you prepared for those? My job is to partner with you. And so I always teach compliance officers, I want to mentor them. You have to become indispensable. You will not do that by being the pain in the ass in the back office saying, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. Yes, you can, but how do we get you to do that? And the problem is most of those folks don't have enough knowledge. They know the law, but they don't know the actual application. So one of the first things I learned in law school is the difference between theory and application, right? Tenured law professors are going to teach you theory all day long. The adjuncts are going to teach you the application of those laws, and folks, they are sometimes incredibly different. I have violated laws before on purpose. Fair Credit Reporting Act. You have to have a permissible purpose to pull a credit report. When I'm standing in a fraud department and I've identified an identity theft ring coming through my institution, and I've got a Nigerian fraud ring that is setting up accounts left and right, and I can actually identify those accounts, and I went in and pulled credit reports on every single one of them, because who's going to sue me? The criminal? The victim who I just saved because they don't have an account with us? It's just that somebody stole their information and set up an account with us. So I pulled all these credit reports, found one credit card company they all had in common. So we knew there was someone on the inside at this big company stealing data, giving it to this fraud ring, and they were running around the country opening up all sorts of loans and deposit accounts. There's a time and a place. But a theory is you can't do this, but the application, sometimes it's different. I will violate the law. I'll violate Reg CC. Am I going to hold a stolen check forever? Sure. What's a regulator going to do? Charge me $100? Go for it, right? Saving that $250,000 means more to me than your $100 penalty. But it's knowing how the law works and being able as a compliance officer to drive that change internally, to have the power to sit at a table and say, here's what you can do to accomplish what you want to accomplish without violating the law. I need them to be indispensable. Some of you have heard me say in various forums, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. Compliance officers aren't at the table, and they're not invited back to parties because they don't actually engage the way that they should. They should be your partner, and generally they're not. So they're not helping you figure out these changes. Wouldn't you want a compliance officer who's teaching you ways to save a lot of money and to open up staffing, to actually reduce, like increase your revenue or reduce your expenses so you could hire the people that you need versus having to find new money to find those folks? I would. So what we do then is the past is out here. So again, we want to clean that up because we don't want it to exist. You guys should not be looking through that rearview mirror ever, right? I want you in the past with your side views, or in your present in the side views. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take that victory loop, which is your present. Now, we've gone through every area. We've freed up revenue. We've got room for staff. We've promoted people We're paying people more money. But what we do, and this is in the victory loop in the present, where people like balance comp really come in. Because the first thing you want to do is figure out, again, how would I want it to look today? Not how do I put Band-Aids on things, but how do I want it to look today? And once you go through and you clean all this up, that's when you come in and you reevaluate job descriptions and titles. You reevaluate pay. You are firing on all cylinders with probably a huge reduction in the number of people, and then you can invest some of that money back into technology. But again, you're going to create a work environment. I've got one of my clients that's operating at a high level now, and the CEO, I asked him, I said, you know, so how has this affected you? And he said, you know, Deborah, I don't think I've smiled this much in years. I actually get to go out and go golfing again. He said, I've had nothing but stress over the last few years. That particular client ended up cutting about 10% of their workforce, reallocating almost 5% to other areas instead of having to hire new folks, gave people promotions, and all of that money that they saved when they got rid of folks, they actually reinvested with, again, actual salary increases, base pay increases, and variable pay. So again, it affects all of you guys, but I imagine most of you would rather have 80 really strong performing people than 120 that you're questioning, like, my gosh, we're always in a meeting about these folks. So once we have the present corrected, and again, it's counterintuitive because people don't want to take the time to invest in going backwards, to take that step backwards, to move 5 steps forward. And so it's really hard to convince them until, again, a regulator's applied a lot of pain that we should go through this exercise and we should figure this out because it's ultimately going to benefit us. But once we have everything where we want it to be and we've reevaluated, the next step is one of the most critical, and this is where you all really do come into play. Change management. Most of my clients don't have it, and if they do, they'll have a new products and services committee, right? And IT will run that, or they'll have strategic planning where only senior leadership and the board are involved and nobody actually doing the work is involved. I like change management better because this is a dynamic process that you literally layer on top of your present. This is like the skin. It's the barrier that's going to protect you from future violations, because once you fix this, the last thing you want to do is go back to having this. So it's how do you keep this, and that's the change management piece that we layer on top, right? So what that looks like, essentially its purpose is, I encourage all my clients, and I actually provide the charter and committee and all that stuff for free, is look, we're going to have a group of people, the people that are actually affected, and human resources is one of those people, at the table. Every single time there is a staffing change, there is a regulatory change, a product change, a service change, a system change, it all goes to the centralized change management committee. And it is comprised of the people who do the day-to-day work. It's not senior leadership. They understand what's going on, but they're not the ones dealing with the day-to-day problems. So this is usually led by a compliance officer or someone else, not audit. Audit can be in the room, but they're not helping with anything. We don't want to create a conflict of interest. But this change management committee gets together, and it can be frequently if you've got a lot going on. It might be infrequently, depending on your asset size and what's going on there. But what I want them to do is get in a room, and let's say you say, okay, we have a vacancy. We just found out that we lost 2 of our loan officers. Okay, let's get together as a committee, because what we need to figure out is A, not our knee-jerk, let's replace them. What does that area look like? Let's do an analysis to figure out, do we need them? If we do, what roles do we actually need? Let's make sure that HR is driving the conversation to make sure that we have consistent titling, that we have consistent job descriptions, that we have consistent pay. But everybody's at the table helping understand, how do we make this change? How do we make it consistent with what we've done historically? And then how do we test and roll this out and make sure that it's being tested? So let's say it's not a loan officer thing. We've got a regulatory change coming. Okay, let's get together. Who all is affected by that? Well, marketing's not in the room. They're affected. Okay, let's get marketing in the room. Let's figure this out. And what we're going to do is come up with an implementation plan. who all's going to be affected, who's going to do what, what's the rollout of this. So here's the plan. Here's how we're going to execute it. We have to update these policies, these procedures, these risk assessments. This is to prevent you from having future violations, right? You got this great present, let's protect it by making sure that everything new that could affect it, it's kind of like having an atmosphere that burns up all the stuff coming into it before it gets there. That's what this is meant to do, and HR plays a key role in that. If you guys, look, if I had it my way, you guys would be sitting at the top of the org charts because everything that happens in an organization should come, there should be some human resources conversation around how is this going to affect the people. This is why we have salary compression and stuff, because business lines are largely making a lot of decisions. You guys are feeling the brunt of that and having to deal with it, but it's that accountability without ownership. I'm more of a let's centralize, right? When I was a regulator, two things I looked for as red flags when I went into an organization. One, decentralization. I'm going to be doing a deep dive on you if I find decentralization. But the second thing was looking for places where employees had accountability but no ownership. Because we all know what that looks like, right? Company has a massive issue, CEO gets a golden parachute, middle management gets fired. Middle management had accountability. They didn't own how that process was supposed to be executed or rolled out. They didn't get to sit at the table and say, well, I think this makes sense, but this doesn't. So I look for those two things. And this is a place where, again, I think human resources plays a much better role. And I wish I could just grant you guys full authority as I stand here, right? But I don't have that luxury. So change management then layers right on top of this. You guys are at the table. You're the ones determining what should that salary look like. We've got a new position. Do we need it? Yes, we do. Okay, let's talk about title. Let's fit it into our universe of job descriptions and titles, right? Make sure all that's done. So this is where, this to me is the most important part of this conversation, is having this piece. And most people don't have this piece, right? They're not, and why? Most of the time it's because they're putting out fires all day long. Most of us go into the office and we're not thinking, you know, how could I piss off a branch today, right? What could I do that would upset the people that I work with, my colleagues? What could I do today to upset somebody over in loan operations? Most of us really are trying to do the best we can at the time with what we've been given, right? So most of us, the reason that we have challenges is not because we don't care about the people we work with, it's because we don't understand what they do, right? So I am a firm believer that most people are trying to do the right things. But the reality is that there's a lot of stuff that goes on in these institutions. We're putting out fires all day long. And what happens when you guys get overwhelmed in your personal lives, professional life? What's one of the things that we do as human beings, again, because this all comes back to being human. When you're overwhelmed, what do you find yourselves doing? Anything but the thing that's overwhelming you, right? How many of you have been home and there's like massive problems going on and you're like, I'm going to go organize the closet? One thing you'd never do, like you've had years to organize that closet, but suddenly it's the most important thing you can do because it helps you avoid the thing you need to be doing, right? We do it at the office too. You know, that's a big problem. That's a big fire to put out. I think I'm going to go over here and redo my org chart, right? I had somebody one time at this very toxic institution. Walked into her office, got a backlog, we got to look back, we're paying millions of dollars to have people in there fixing stuff, and she's focused on her org chart, trying to figure out how she's going to hire 46 people. A, you're not hiring 46 people, we don't need 46 people, I need you doing your job, but it's this, I call it mowing the grass when the house is on fire, right? And we all do it. But that's why we don't have time to sometimes focus on the things that matter, and change management isn't such a big issue because we kick the can. I'll do it later. Do it later. Deal with that later. But later usually doesn't come. And when it does, it's a little bit too late, right? So change management has a tendency to get brushed under the carpet because people don't see it as critical. And it's the faucet running, folks, right? We can clean up all this other stuff, but if your faucet's still on, you're going to find yourself right back in that place again, all right? So we've streamlined our present. We feel good. We feel great. We put change management on top of that. And again, all of this will be in the slides. I know you guys are getting copies, but again, it's basically what I was just saying is we really have a structure in place to make sure the right people at the table. The other thing that I should say about this committee though, is it is a management committee, but what I like about it is it also empowers folks to know that they're a part of something important. Because how often it's the senior leadership team that's invited to the table to participate in this stuff. When you actually take staff and give them the authority to start making some of these decisions, to me, this is that radical humility, right? Letting other people make these decisions. And what I love about this, there are a lot of things I love about this conference, but all of these various topics and stuff all roll in together. They're all integrated. Like everything that happens in a financial institution is ultimately integrated. But it is radical humility to let other people make decisions and figure out how do we solve problems, right? I don't believe, I was talking to somebody at lunch about this. There's what I love about problems, and I deal with them every day, is that there's always a solution. And I know it's out there, it's just what is that solution? How do I get creative around what that solution should be, right? So I had a sign on my door at the Federal Reserve that said, if you don't have a solution, you don't have a problem. I didn't want anybody coming into my office with a problem. What have you done to try and solve that problem, right? I had a lot of really great people at the Fed, but a couple of things about them, about, again, being human, is that we have a tendency to want to just quickly get an answer versus trying to find a problem for ourselves. This also goes back to something I was talking about at lunch, and it is a bit of a tangent. But because I'm up here as somebody who, again, feels like an interloper, I want to make sure that you guys get value out of these conversations. So I want to share a few things with you. My takeaways, you can absorb them, you can disregard them. But from my perspective, a couple of things that might be helpful to you is I speak and teach a lot of business and finance students as well. I love talking with them, but Christy's right. They feel like they have no future, that they don't know where they're going, nobody wants to hire them, but they also all want to go work for Deloitte and Morgan Stanley for some strange reason. But one of the things I emphasize with them, and I'll emphasize it with you guys, speaking about people who like to just get solutions to problems versus thinking through it themselves, is I don't know if it's changing, but we talk a lot, we talk about like customer service positions and member service. We talk a lot about people having those like service skills. Two things that I really focused on at the Fed, and if they're helpful to you, great, but if they're not, again, disregard. One of them is there are tangibles and intangibles, right? We have tangible quality. It's our experience, our knowledge. And we focus on that with resumes and stuff. Tell me who you are. One of the things I implemented at the Federal Reserve, which was fascinating, is because I had all of compliance, it's a very technical area. And we got a lot of really great resumes. People that, man, if they did everything that they put on that resume, I could probably get rid of half my staff and just hire those two people and they could run the whole show. But I implemented what's called a technical interview. I literally brought them in, sat them with 6 people that specialized in BSA, AML, fair lending, CRA, consumer protection, operational laws, all of the lending laws. I mean, we put them through the gamut. But what was interesting is when we implemented that is how many people didn't show up for the interview, right? Weeded them out quickly. So on the tangible side of the equation, you might want to think about certain positions, particularly risk and compliance, doing a technical interview. And if someone says, thank you for asking me to do a technical interview, that's probably somebody you're going to want to hire, because most people aren't like thanking you for that. But it is a really good process to get into. On the intangible side, though, this is where I think we've fallen down a lot, is we focus so much on what someone's knowledge and skills are, their experience, that we forget about these intangible qualities. I will tell you, I can teach you anything. With enough time, I can teach you all about anti-money laundering. I can teach you how to prevent fraud across every product and service and every fraud type being committed. I can teach you how to build a risk assessment from the ground up. I can teach you how to perform really good due diligence on both sides of a mergers and acquisition discussion. I can teach you anything, but I can't teach you how to be a good human being. I can't teach you good work ethic, how to be resourceful, reliable, honest, trustworthy. Those are what I tell these students to emphasize in their interviews, is I may not have all the knowledge, but I'm going to work my butt off to make that happen for you. I will go out and get the answers. I'm not going to come to your office with a problem. I'm going to come with a few solutions, and we're going to talk through those, right? Those intangibles matter, and I hope we start interviewing more for those, because those are transferable skills, right? And sometimes we lose very good candidates because we are focused on what they're telling us their skills, their experience, and their knowledge are. And A, not always true, and B, not always effective. I hired a guy one time, technical interview, awesome. He didn't have the intangibles. He didn't want to work. So he's great to have, but he's not doing anything, right? So what I found across my clients, very true, you'll always find an exception, but the general rule is hiring somebody with intangibles that doesn't, they have the intangibles, but they don't possess the tangibles you need, they're far more successful from a performance standpoint than the person with the tangibles who lacks the intangibles, right? Because again, it all comes back to being a human being. And some people have really good work ethic and they have these qualities. So I just want to throw that out there as a couple things you may want to think about. The other thing is with risk and compliance, if you guys find that you're hiring for those roles, there are 4 types of risk and compliance people. There are people that can build programs from the ground up. There are people that can fix things that are broken. There are people that can maintain something that's operating well. And there's always the person that can come in and break something that's working perfectly fine. Those are your 4 types of people. Know your institution and what you need, because not everybody can do those. I pride myself on doing 3 of those. But I work with clients who'll have a BSA officer, for example, this place needs to be rebuilt, not their strength. So either we get it to a place where they can maintain it, but you need to know the type of person you need and fill it with that type of person, knowing that even if you're rebuilding, if they're not somebody that can maintain, because their thing is, I want to build it, but then I want to go, you need to know that you're going to have a vacancy once they get that completed. But there are only 4 types of risk and compliance people, without exception. Those are your 4. And they probably carry over into other areas as well. So once we have our present, it's fixed, it's tight, we put change management over the top of it. Next thing, strategic planning. That goes over the top of this as well. This is what it looks like. This is the model, right? Now what I have is I have a clean present. I have this beautiful change management to make sure I don't have any future violations that are systemic. And on top of that, I now get to step back. My present has expanded. My past is gone. My future has now opened up. I get to spend more time thinking about growth and development and how do we want to roll this out in the next 3 to 5 years, right? What do we want to look like? How many of you tried to make decisions when you're really stressed out? Nobody. But with this model, you have more time to step back and say, again, I'm very much a fan of doing things that are methodical, intentional, strategic. That's what this allows you to do, is to actually then implement where are we going. And we can do that in a stress-free environment where we can make good decisions because we have good morale, we have a good team, we have good change management. We now get to focus on where are we going. We are looking through that windshield saying, man, look at that sunset versus what the heck is going on behind me in this rear view. This is where I want you all to be. And the good news is all of you can get there. The hardest part's that victory loop, taking the time to create it. But it is absolutely possible. I've seen it done. And again, this is what I push all my clients to do. Let's get proactive. Let's get preventative. Let's stop being human beings for a minute. Let's stop wasting a ton of money. Let's actually roll this out in a way that makes sense. And I don't have to explain SWOT analysis and all that to you. It's in there. That's what it looks like. It's just, where do we go next? Like the confidence in that. That's how I like to feel every day, is that. So this is how most of us feel every day, right? Or maybe this. Or some of my clients feel like this is what's going on because the killer's always in the woods, right? Like this is how their days feel. But this is actually where we want to go. This is how we want to feel, like that, right? There we go. All right. Any questions for me? I know that's a lot, you guys, but it really is about just creating that 3-tiered model. Instead of waiting for the pain, let's really focus on moving towards the pleasure and creating things that actually work for us, benefit us, make us happy, take some of the stress out of our days, and allow us to really invest in people and make the most of who we have and what we're trying to do. I know most of us, again, are trying to do all the right things, but the way that we've historically done it just simply doesn't work. We end up, I know most of you, because you're no exception to probably the majority of my clients, is you spend a lot of time putting Band-Aids on things, trying to like limp through today. Let's take that step back. Let's figure out how this is going to look, and let's get it fixed. Now, before we go, I do want to say I'm doing something that I didn't think I'd do. I have 3 red envelopes up here. These 3 red envelopes, they're conditions attached. You come over to my table, I'm going to give you a business packet because I want you to take it back. You can call me in 10 years, you can call me in 2 years, you can never call me. But I want you to have information about Armor. If you come over, you get a business packet, sign your name. I don't need your email or any of that. I'm going to draw, at the end of today, for these 3 envelopes. Inside each one is my business card, but also a coupon, $5,000 off. And initially it said $5,000 off a signed contract. I cut out the signed contract. This is free. It's about the equivalent of 3 days. You can work with me in 2026. Whatever's in my wheelhouse, if you need it, it's $5,000, $5,000, $5,000, right? On top of that, I have 2 other red envelopes, same conditions, but these are for the signed contract. So if you know that there's work you want to have done, doesn't have to be next year. It's just I want to make sure not everything's about money. I do love to help people. I love to fix organizations. I spend a lot of time in banks. I've got a newfound love for credit unions. I love the different atmosphere, but again, my sweet spot is between 1 and 5 billion. Those are my favorite institutions, but I have clients smaller and clients bigger. But these are a big deal. So again, those are going to be over there. It's got to come over, pick up a packet, sign your name. These 2, if you know that you might need some help, sign up. I'm going to be giving these away as well. And if you find you're not going to use it, pass it along. But you guys, I love what I do. I love helping people, and again, I love lifting people up, right? Because I rise higher. And that's part of what I do is I love to bring that human psychology to what I do to help people really get to a place where they feel extraordinary. Being average sucks. We all want to be extraordinary and feel extraordinary, and I want you to all feel that value when you walk into your organizations. And if you currently feel that way, and I hope you do, fantastic. The other thing I would say is that a lot of my clients think that everything's okay because the regulators haven't done deep dives, and one day they wake up and suddenly they've changed nothing but their exam ratings have changed. So even if you think things are okay, sometimes they're not, and there's a 3-week stress testing that can be done to really look at your organization and figure out what your exam report would look like. Something I did at the Fed before I went to an organization. I would go through 3 weeks, spend time looking at everything that you've got, all of your policies, procedures, risk assessments, findings, strategic planning. I could tell you exactly how the exam report was going to read before I even walked into the institution, right? So even if you think you're clean, you may not be. So 3, free, 2, it's $5,000 off a signed contract, but I wanted to make sure I made these offers to you guys. So you just have to come on over. That's it for me. All right? Thanks.